Fresco è l'ultimo nato in casa Masi.
Fresco is the newborn in the Masi family, and it's not simply a new wine, but it's a whole new concept of wine. We obtained it by subtraction, or as we call it, by the grape juice effect, the most essential and direct process from grapes to bottle. As the name implies, Fresco conjures up so many sensorial traits of authenticity. It's as fresh as baked bread, as genuine as milk. And its color, it's bright red. It's very alluring. And it has a fruit aroma, most definitely cherry. There's the Corvina grape, the Merlot Corvina. And its taste provides a certain balance, as well as persistence and refinement.
Un grande equilibrio, una grande informalità e anche una persistenza e un'eleganza.
Here you can see our family in Val di Marano. There's my mother, Elda, my father, Guido, and then there's me. I was the handsome one. He was 3 years old, so I must have been probably 16 or 17.
In the black and white picture, the family is posing for a photographer. They're standing on the front door steps of their home. The mother is in the back, the father is in the front, and their 4 children are all around them. On the left, a young Sandro Boscaini defiantly looks straight into the camera, in his striped trousers, leather shoes, and white shirt.
My brother Sergio is 3 years younger than me, and my brother Bruno 10 years younger. We were the boys of the family. This must be from 49?
Del 49.
The history of the Boscainis is all about the constant perpetuation of the values of the land, wine, and trade. For 8 generations, the family has been celebrating an almost sacred ritual, that of winemaking, through cultivation, grape harvesting, and appassimento. This is the story of their legacy, the legacy of a family, a company, and a wine that made the culture of time the key to their success. My name is Matteo Caccia. Welcome to the magic of time, 250 years of Masi.
I feel a huge responsibility. I belong to the 8th generation, and I feel responsible towards the 6th one, which is my grandfather's. He's still very much active in the company. He still works 10 hours a day. I've always lived with him. In a way, at times, he was like a father to me. So I just don't want to let him down. You know, I want to manage to live up to his legacy. My name is Alessandro Boscaini. I belong to the 8th generation. Actually, unfortunately, I'm one of the oldest ones of my generation. My job is hospitality, because I work in the business managerial branch of the company. The Masi Wine Experience.
Of all the people I've met during my stay in Valpolicella, Alessandro and his mother Alessandra, Sandro Boscaini's grandson and daughter, helped me understand the most what family means in the Masi tradition.
I'm Alessandra Boscaini. I belong to the 7th generation of the family, and I'm the sales manager of the company.
But she's not only the sales manager of Masi Agricola. Alessandra Boscaini is in fact also an important member of the National Association Le Donne del Vino, the Women of Wine.
Delegata regionale del Veneto, pertanto delle Donne del Vino.
I'm the representative of the Veneto region for the Italian association Le Donne del Vino.
The Italian one is the biggest women of wine association in the world. There are others in France, Spain and Germany, but the Italian one is the biggest, with over 900 members. And they're all professionals in the wine industry. So winemakers, enologists, sommelier, caterers, marketers, all those roles that are somehow key in the wine industry. I've been a representative for the Veneto region for almost 6 or 7 years. Veneto is very important for its wine, and a lot of members are from this area. I would say nearly 70. The goal of the association is to promote wine with a focus on women and to create an all-female network. Because it's not necessarily a feminist stance, you know, and maybe it's a little better in the wine industry. But sometimes women struggle to achieve certain results or to occupy certain positions. It's just a little more complicated for them. So it's really useful to come together and create a network, to create opportunities or simply to provide some support.
Delle opportunità o anche semplicemente un sostegno che può essere utile.
Masi is a historical Italian company. It's been thriving according to that entrepreneurial spirit that made our country great. So, in the best tradition, the start of the family members' careers was never in high-rank positions.
Ho fatto vari passaggi, ho cominciato.
I've done many different jobs. Officially, I started in '92, but I actually started way before, during my summer breaks when I was still at high school. Back then, you could do that, so I used to spend a month or so in the company during summers. I remember the worst year ever when I spent an entire month on the bottling line, and my job was to put capsules on bottles. Now, in those years, there'd been a fire in the company, and those capsules had survived it. So they weren't in good shape, to say the least, and the machine couldn't apply them properly, so I had to apply them manually for 8 hours a day, every day. I do remember that.
Quella me la ricordo, quell'estate.
After these first steps, Alessandra began to work full-time for the company. She took her first business trips, and more importantly, for the first time, she started to see her father, Sandro, not only as her dad, but as an exceptional entrepreneur.
Non avevo mai vissuto proprio così.
I had never really seen him speak in public before. He just has the crowd in the palm of his hand whenever he presents something. For example, in Canada, where there are many wine lovers, everyone's hanging off his lips. He has such charisma when he's in front of a crowd. I'm always really impressed.
Mi ha veramente colpito.
It's always fascinating to learn about the history of a family directly from its members, and even more so when they fondly remember their own ancestors. For example, Alessandra remembers her grandfather Guido, who belonged to the 5th generation of Boscainis.
Me lo ricordo bene da piccola.
I do remember him very well. When I was little, I thought he was actually a little scary because he had this deep voice and he was a man of very few words. But growing up, I realized that he was actually a sweet man. I remember when I had my son. I was young at the time and both my grandparents were still very much alive. I went to visit them with the baby. Oh, he must have been a few months old. 2 or 3 weeks in a row I went on Wednesdays. Then on the 4th week, my grandfather phoned me. And it was very unusual because he didn't really like or understand technology. But he phoned me and he was kind of mad and he said, "Where are you? It's Wednesday and you're not here." He was just a sweet man. Few words, but so caring.
Però molto premuroso, molto attento.
Mio padre, che era una persona molto austera.
My father was a very strict man, very old style. He hardly ever laughed or smiled, but he was very open, very honest. For example, I don't remember him ever saying no to me. He was more like, if you want to do it, you do it, but you do it well. That was his golden rule. I went to university and he wanted me to become a notary, and I said, "But I like your job, Father." And he said, "No, son, please forget it." Actually, it was not a very prestigious job back in the day. Wine was still considered something a little vulgar. But that was a long time ago. It was even before the Vin Char, Vin Scur, Vin Gros sold in Milan. It was a time when they had like 115 litres per capita. Today, it's more like 32, 33 litres. So things have changed.
So what are the origins of the Boscaini family?
Here's the story. I always say that we are celebrating the 250th harvest of the Masi Vaio, because the Boscaini's branch from this area, from Gargagnago, has always been making and selling wine. They came across this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They found this God-blessed, isolated land to produce wine, this Vaio. It was a land that originally belonged to another family, the Bonaldis. They were bakers, and they didn't have the time or the means to take care of this land. So they turned to the Boscainis and they said, if you want, you can come and cultivate this land and this vineyard. You take care of it, you keep the harvest for yourselves, and you provide only olive oil and wine for our family. So the Boscainis sent over this Giobatta boy. Giobatta was a member of the original family. He was young and fit enough to endure the 2-hour walk from home to the vineyard. He went up to the Masi Vaio and he stayed there the whole week. This is what my grandfather told me. He remembered his own grandfather, and his grandfather was actually Giobatta's son.
So, Giobatta belonged to the first generation of the family. He was a tireless man who endured a 2-hour walk just to go and take care of the vineyard.
Now, Giobatta's grandson was a young man named Giuseppe. Before the unification of Italy, he went up to the vineyard with his father to cultivate it. One day, he came across the third wife of Mr. Bonaldi. The other 2 wives had died, I believe, in childbirth or plague. I don't remember. Anyway, this woman was a very refined lady. We have a portrait of her here. This is after the Napoleonic age, and it shows in her features. She was an upper-class lady. She belonged to a family of fabric sellers. And she cast her eyes on him because she had a daughter who was an only child. And so she made him stay. He kind of moved there. He started to stay longer and longer, you know. And then she made him buy 50 or 60 fields in the Verona area, including the field next door, the field adjacent to the estate, the Mezzanella Vaio. And then she made him marry her daughter, Cristina, and merge the properties.
And like in the greatest stories, this story is full of anecdotes that seem to come from the pen of a writer.
Now here's the fun part of the story. Who did they buy this property from? From the Scandola family. And what did the Scandolas do? Well, they owned many fields, but under the Austrian domination, they minted counterfeit money. They were forgers. Professor Quintarelli explained the story. He explained why there's a portion of the Masi Vaio that doesn't belong to us. And it didn't belong to the Bonaglis. The Scandola family owned it. They got this portion of land and hired a laborer to work in it. And then one day, this guy was minting coins and saw a coach driving all the way up to the Vaio. And he was like, wait a minute. I've never seen coaches up here. Only the bishop comes up here once a year. So this coach must be police. And what did he do? He took the coins, hid them on some cart, and covered everything with manure. The policemen arrived and searched everywhere, but they found nothing and just went away. After the incident, the Scandolas realized they'd better get away someplace else. So they sold the land and went away. And then the land was bought. Boscaini bought it so that he could merge. Well, he bought the land, married Mrs. Bonaldi, and merged the properties of the Masi Vaio.
Giuseppe, Sandro's great-grandfather, had a natural business sense. He took advantage of the early railways and decided to move out to the plain, where he bought 2 estates. To start a business, all it took was a vineyard to take care of and some equipment to produce homemade wine. But for a larger and more professional production, for a broader commercialization, that was simply not enough. It took a lot more than what the Torbe Cantina could offer. It took a more advanced facility. And soon, Giuseppe Boscaini bought one. For this purpose, and with the help of his children, in April 1888, he bought a manor with a fully equipped modern wine cellar and a few lands in the Valgatara area near Merano. He bought the estate from Emilia and Clementina Bossi, two wealthy landowners from Merano di Valpolicella, who were about to move to Milan. And not only this, he also bought another vast property in Pozzo di Valgatara, which would eventually be inherited by his son, Giovanni Battista. He was a forward-looking, brave, and acuminous visionary. His every step was meticulously calculated, both when he bought the properties and when he relocated. He never neglected any aspect of his long-term project. Since he wanted to enhance the development of his commercial strategy, he relocated to a more central area, closer to the city and to the main roads. He was now part of a vineyard district, the Valpolicella, Pedemontana, and Valley, which was far more dynamic and open to the new. This story comes from a book written by Sandro Boscaini titled Amarone and Beyond, Masi, 250 Years of Harvests, Family, and Business. But how do we go from the small company of the beginning to the fully developed industrial establishment of today?
Yeah, well, in 1888, they moved from Torbe to Merano because there was already a fully equipped winery there. But the division of the company into an agricultural business and a trading business happened a little later, I would say in 1890. It was my grandfather's idea, Paolo Boscaini. And then my father and my uncles came on board, and it became Paolo Boscaini and Sons. Together, they divided the management of the vineyard that they owned from all the commercial management aspects of the company. Then, of course, everything changed after the war. Everything. Distribution changed, we began to export, and we started the bottling process.
But like in every captivating story, there are also hard times that seem insurmountable. Hard times, like the Great Fire that ravaged part of the establishment.
Yeah, I remember it vividly. There was a huge fire on a Sunday. It was a few days before the Masi Award. We were supposed to hold the ceremony right there in the winery. It was the third Masi Award, so it was 1983. That's when it happened. It was a very hard time for me. The bankers came to see if we had any trouble with bank credits, but my father, I must say, well, it was a very tough moment, and I really thought we were through. But my father was positive everything would turn out to be all right.
But the family tree of the Boscainis is not complete yet.
Back then, my father and my uncle ran the business. Each of them had 4 sons. They decided the first 2 of each would work in the company. So my brother Mario and I, we were the 3rd and the 4th, we took separate ways, even though we always stayed in the family, of course. I became an industrial engineer, specializing in, well, actually, back then, there were not all these majors like today. You know, management, computer. I just majored in engineering and took a couple of extra exams in business management. Then I worked at other companies for almost 30 years, first as an advisor for a company in Milan, then on my own, then as an executive for a big company in the Vicenza area. But I was always a part of the family. You know, board meetings happened around the Sunday table. And then in 2006, my cousins and my brother left the company, and I took over the logistics sector, shipping, materials, quality control, and so on.
In the picture that Sandro Boscaini described, there was his brother Bruno. He's the one who's 10 years younger than him, smiling, all squeezed into his mother's loving arm, Today, he works in sustainability, but like everyone else in the family, he started with small jobs.
One of my earliest memories is me at 10 or 11 putting labels on bottles. We actually glued them back in the day, and the bottles were not that many in the 60s. But sometimes there were these big demijohns and we had to weigh them. And we had to attach these seals certifying the weight and the tar of the demijohn. I attached so many of these seals. But the bottles had to be hand-labeled one by one back in the 60s. Sustainability means a lot of different things. Social sustainability, economic sustainability, environmental sustainability. As far as production is concerned, I must say we always took care of the basics. You know, recycling materials, waste sorting, reduction in consumption, water conservation. We did all sorts of things. For example, we reduced the quantity of film needed for the packaging of pellets. We experimented with different types of films and tractions, and we managed to reduce each pallet from 7 hectograms to 4 hectograms. We also operated a substantial reduction of water use through a sanitization protocol with specific guidelines that we've been perfecting over time. And then, of course, there's energy. 16% of it comes from solar panels. Also, we use warm water to produce steam in order to sanitize the equipment. We obtain warm water through boilers, but also through thermal solar panels.
And Bruno Boscaini's children give their contribution to keep the legacy alive too.
I'm the 6th generation. There's already the 7th one, because Sandro and I both have children. Anita studied biotechnologies, and now she works in the enology sector, in the laboratory, but also in sustainability. So environment and safety are her fields of expertise. And then there's Giacomo. He's an area manager and a brand ambassador.
Sono Anita Boscaini.
My name is Anita Boscaini, and I belong to the 7th generation of the family. At Masi, I take care of certifications, environment, safety, and sustainability.
Inoltre faccio
I'm also part of a technical group that works on research projects and universities.
le università.
When we talk about sustainability, it can be, well, it's a lot of things. I work mainly in environmental sustainability, so basically coordinate different groups within the company with a common goal to promote initiatives and further change to improve environmental performances.
A migliorare le performance ambientali.
We've been sustainable for 250 years.
That is Federico Girotto, the CEO of Masi Agricola.
Our company necessarily had to be sustainable, even when, pardon my bluntness, even when it was not a trend. It was even more authentic in a way. You know, there are 3 pillars of sustainability. You have environmental sustainability, which is not only the sustainability down in the vineyard, but it's also in every aspect of the production. It's embedded in the company values, even in the winery. We ask ourselves, how do you preserve circularity and deal with the dispersion of resources? You know, there's sustainability even in the offices. For example, we provide our employees with fresh fruit, and we are active in waste sorting. You know, it has to be a 360-degree process. And then there's social sustainability, which means essentially to enhance all the ethics and values in the company in order to create medium and long-term relationships with our stakeholders. This is something highly valued in any company nowadays. For example, we have our Masi Progetto Uva di Qualità, which is a club of wine growers who work to further the production protocol of our technical group and with whom we've been having a long-term relationship. You know, this project is now 20 years old, but we have all these families who've been providing grapes for us for decades, in one case even 100 years. This is social sustainability. Just think that in the company we have a generational turnover every 13 years. If our resources turn over every 13 years, It means that we don't consider our workers as a burden or a nuisance, like in many other places, but rather we consider them as a valid opportunity. And finally, there's economic sustainability. It's not a short-term concept. It's not something limited to a one-year span or a trimester span, as unfortunately happens in many cases. No, it means to create the right conditions for the company to grow stronger and stronger, especially in terms of financial feedback, because our brand needs to be placed within the food industry at the end of the day.
Sull'alimentare il posizionamento del nostro brand.
Federico Girotto is not a member of the family, but he came to be part of it thanks to his job.
Sono arrivato in Masi, diciamo, senza un...
Well, I joined Masi without any specific application, but I met our president, Mr. Sandro Boscaini. I used to work somewhere else. I was a manager at a clothing company, and I had previous experience in other industries. However, I always worked with premium brands, and also in the retail business. And in a way, this all helped here at Masi too. But if you ask me, no, I'm not a wine guy.
Però non sono wine guy, ecco.
You heard Federico Girotto at the beginning as he was tasting a brand new wine that he deeply cares about, the Fresco di Masi. And here's Raffaele Boscaini as he presents it to us.
The Fresco di
Masi is an extremely contemporary wine, but at the same time, it has a certain old days quality to it. It seems like the wine you made back in the old days, but it tastes like what you would expect from a modern wine. Whenever I try a simple wine, like the Fresco di Masi, I immediately think, it seems like the wine my grandfather used to make at home. But hey, this is very good. You know, during the early stages of the pandemic, during the lockdown, we came up with the idea of a simple wine. A wine with few superfluities in terms of taste and in terms of production process. Just like a grape juice, so to speak. With the whole pandemic situation, we had a lot of time to stay at home, and so we were able to speed up the process. And we went back to the essence of wine.
Quindi cosa abbiamo fatto? Siamo andati all'essenza del vino. Se spogliassimo il vino da tutte queste cose.
We asked ourselves, what if we strip wine of all its extra features? And that's how we obtained the most authentic wine possible, the most essential, with the full taste of the grapes used to make it. We harvested the grapes and we squeezed them right after that. And by the way, these grapes come from an organic cultivation with no extra manipulation in the vineyard, or little to none. We don't add any yeast to boost fermentation, we don't remove the skin, we don't let the grapes dry, we just let them break down with their natural yeast. We don't add any sugar, and when the process is over, we don't filter the final product. We simply lower the temperature and let the wine decant naturally. So we get rid of all the dirt and eventually we bottle it just the way it is. That's it. And we don't need any kind of special bottle. We don't need anything special. We just need a light bottle, because the wine is supposed to be tasted within a short time. Actually, the lighter, the better, which is great, because it's easier to produce and to transport. And then the packaging. We need a label that states clearly what's in the bottle. So we used a pop version of our iconic label. The same we used for the Amarone and the Campo Fiorin. Something colourful, something that draws the attention of our younger generations, something appealing to them. And everything is completely plastic-free. Everything's natural. Even the glue we use to attach the label is natural. Even the cork, which we obtained from recycled cork mixed with an organic polymer, which is essentially beeswax. And there's no capsule. We didn't need it, so it's plastic-free. All of these choices defined a paradigm change for all of us. You know, in a way, we all learned how to keep it simple, thanks to the pandemic.
But the history of the Boscaini family would not be complete without the voice of the youngest of the Boscaini brothers, Mario.
My name is Mario Boscaini. I belong to the 6th generation of the family. I don't have any operational role in the company, but I'm a member of the board. However, throughout my career as an insurance agent, I've always felt a strong connection with my family and with our company.
And Mario Boscaini shares a fond memory that speaks a lot about his family and this company.
I have a lovely childhood memory. It was the late 50s. I was a kid and I was very proud of my father. Every Friday, he'd take a train to Milan and he'd go down to Piazza Affari because there was a weekly wine market there. Every Friday night, I'd wait impatiently for him to come back home because I wanted the train ticket. It was this small, rectangular light green card that the train controller had to pierce. And I used to collect these tickets, all of them. My father would always give the ticket to me. It was his way to make me feel part of the family business, even though I was just a kid. And I felt extremely proud to be part of this family. I'm still proud. Always was, always am, and always will be, even though I have a different job now.
Now, to conclude this episode about the history of the Boscainis, we have to take a leap. Actually, 2 leaps. One, back in time, in the past, among the many memories of the family house. The other in the future, with the voice of Alessandro, Sandro's grandson and member of the 8th generation.
The house had a ground floor where we'd normally spend our days. Then there was a basement, which was the cellar, and on the first floor is where we'd sleep. Upstairs, there was also an attic where we left the grapes out to dry. I remember in the morning, I'd wake up to the sound of workers climbing up and down the stairs to carry the grapes down in the cellar. I remember the rich aroma of the grapes that pervaded the frutaio. It was a fruit aroma. It was sweet and sticky at the same time, a really very, very strong scent. And, depending on the time of the day or the weather, you could also smell the pungent sharpness of the fermented wine from downstairs in the cellar. It was this acrid scent, and it blended with the sweet aroma from upstairs in the attic. So, basically, our family was used to living amidst wine.
Viveva la famiglia immersa in questo vino.
We speak of the 8th generation, but there's actually already a 9th generation, isn't there?
That's right. I have a son, and he's going to be the eldest of his generation. He's named after my grandfather, who is his great-grandfather. His name is Sandro. He's a lively kid, to say the least. It takes a village sometimes, right? You know, when I come back home after work every night, I'm usually pretty tired and I feel like resting till the next day. But then I see him smiling at me. He's always there looking up to his dad. He wants to spend time with me. And so I usually end up collecting all the energy left to be there for him.
This exciting family tale, with all its names and details, resembles a story by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. But now it's time to move on. It's time to hear and taste a new wine experience. In the next episode of this podcast, I'm going to tell you all about the Masi wine experience.